It's been a few months now since GM Whitley became one of the newest members on Mount Pleasant Town Council. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with her one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on the free Quintin's Close-Ups iHeartRadio podcast. GM Whitley, it's so good to see you again.
It's so good to see you too.
I appreciate it greatly. Gosh, it's been a while since I've seen you.
It has. A lot has happened since we last spoke.
That's right. You're now a councilwoman for the town of Mount
I
Pleasant.
am.
How would you describe GM Whitley, the town councilwoman?
Same as GM Whitley, the candidate. I don't think I've really changed much at all of what I stand for as far as, managing growth in the town and supporting the arts. Those are kind of my main focuses.
And let me turn to some developing news. Obviously, there's a huge talk around the town about the Medal of Honor Museum. And I know that Mayor Will Haney posted a couple of things about that on Facebook recently. And he basically says that a lot of the board members are concerned about the current proposal for the Medal of Honor Museum, being that it's not feasible, fitting, or sustainable, and that an offer has been made for a new way forward for several entities to work together to solve the problem and get the museum built. What proposals should go into this new museum in your mind?
I'm not familiar at all with the mayor's proposal. I haven't heard anything about that. It's really all just kind of going around on Facebook right now, and I think we're just sort of waiting to hear what that plan would be. I think that the Medal of Honor Museum folk have done a really good job of having listening sessions for the public and trying to come up with a new design that will be fitting for the town of Mount Pleasant. I think that the biggest concern that people have is with the granting of a variance in height. There's a concern that if the museum does not get their funding and does not build the museum, that another developer will come in and receive that height exception. So I think if there were a way to carefully craft an exception to the height, a variance that would only be limited to the Medal of Honor Museum, I think that would be a way forward for some council members at least who would feel more comfortable with letting the museum proceed.
You talked earlier about growth, and the mayor also said this too. Town council voted unanimously to proceed with permit allocation to slow growth. And he says this, quote, "In my State of Town address in June, I asked town council to pass a residential building permit allocation system. Last night, council unanimously voted to proceed with advising such a plan to cap residential growth at 2% over the next 5 years. Qualified affordable housing will be exempt, that is. Where should this discussion go next in your mind?"
Well, I think that it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. I think that the staff have been tasked with putting together an ordinance that would implement this permit allocation process. I think that we recently raised impact fees, so that's going to be interesting to see how impact that has on growth. But I don't see anything wrong with tamping the brakes on growth in our town and capping it, because we have so much infrastructure needs in the town of Mount Pleasant that it's about time that we slow down the growth a little bit so we allow our infrastructure and schools to catch up.
You talk about infrastructure, you talk about growth. Obviously, when you talk about those two issues, you also talk about transportation. What is the future of transportation in your mind for Mount Pleasant?
I think that we'll have to wait and see what the comprehensive plan brings forth. I think they will have an idea for a long-term plan for transportation. I know that we've talked about potentially implementing better bus routes in the town, and I believe that the recently approved CARTA budget has some extended routes through the town of Mount Pleasant. But I know there's been talk of maybe even having our own bus loop in the town to help service workers get to the restaurants on Shem Creek and get to the north part of Mount Pleasant, just kind of get around town.
And you talk about town, let me talk, you just mentioned this too, Shem Creek. What's your one word to describe the Wando Dock right now?
Up in the air. I think that it's really amazing that a Mount Pleasant lifelong resident has stepped forward to purchase the dock. I think it remains to be seen what that individual will choose to do with the dock. I think that he has pledged to preserve it for the shrimp boats. But it is going to be private property and privately held. Right. So, and it's currently zoned in such a way that it must maintain its industrial nature. And I don't think that the town council would vote to change it in any way to something residential. So it is my hope that this continues to be a dock that's usable for our shrimping fleet.
And I know also too, there's a big talk right now about the opioid crisis. How is Mount Pleasant tackling that in your mind?
You know, our police force is on it. They are doing a lot of education to try and address that problem. I think it's, you know, it's a nationwide problem, and it's a very difficult one to address because there's just so many prescription drugs that are out there that people become addicted to, and then they turn to heroin when they are no longer having the prescriptions. I think it's, you know, it's just a very difficult issue. So I think that there's a tendency towards overprescription of those drugs, and I think that there's a movement nationwide to move away from that.
And let's go forward. What are the three biggest issues right now on your mind that you want to tackle next on Town Council?
Well, let's see. I think that one of them would be doing a study on the arts in Mount Pleasant. We recently in our budgeted $50,000 to do a study to assess the needs of the town. We have a new park eventually going in Rifle Range Road, and I think that that's a great location to potentially have a community arts center that would have a community theater and gallery space. So I think that's one thing that I'm going to be working on with Town Council. I'm also currently working on a public art project with the Cultural Arts and Pride Commission to do, you know how they did the horses in Lexington,
right,
and the dogs, the bulldogs in Athens.
Right.
And, I think that we're still exploring options, but I think that we found these sculptures of oysters with a pearl, and so it creates like a really good palette for artists to paint on, and then we would unveil those and kind of have them around town and have oysters on parade for the town of Mount Pleasant. The second issue, I mean, I think is growth, and that's a long-term ongoing process as we have different projects come forward and assessing whether or not they're going to be a positive for the town of Mount Pleasant. So that's, I think, is just ongoing, the growth issues. Another thing that I've been working on is updating or actually implementing non-discrimination ordinances for the town. That just passed first reading, and the town did not have non-discrimination ordinances with regards to housing and public accommodations. And now they passed first reading unanimously, and those will come through next month, and then those will be official ordinances in the town. So we will have non-discrimination ordinances in place. So that's another one. I think, I mean, the things that you're raising with the Medal of Honor Museum, I think that's the next big one that the town is going to have to tackle. It actually hasn't come before us yet. It's come before the Planning Commission,
okay,
but it was withdrawn from the Planning Committee. So everything that's happening out there right now is all sort of, you know, broiling, and it's going to come before the council at some point in time down the line, and we will have to actually approve or disapprove of a project. But we don't have a project in front of us at this time. So right now, any talk about the museum is just speculation.
Councilwoman G.M. Whitley, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
You're welcome.
Thank you.